Morning. Welcome to the Maintaining Current Practising Certificates for Mine Operators. Andrew Palmer, Manager Competencies and Authorisations. So to get underway, acknowledgement of country. The Department of Regional New South Wales acknowledge it stands on country, which always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waters, and we show our respect for elders past, present and emerging. We're committed to providing places in which Aboriginal people are included socially, culturally and economically through thoughtful and collaborative approaches to our work. The Zoom webinar protocols. Today's presentation is best viewed on a laptop or desktop screen if possible. Microphones were muted till the QA segment. Cameras can be turned off during the presentation as this session is being recorded. Please use the chat function to ask questions, which we'll answer during the dedicated QA segment, or you may raise your hand to speak at that time. So the contents of the webinar today, firstly, the introduction to the webinar itself, legislative requirements and their application. This is the biggest section and makes this webinar different to previous ones, and it's more focused on legislation and compliance than just general guides and updates for practising certificate holders. The observations for compliance performance. It's based on recent issues with renewals of practising certificates and failure to do so. 4, regulated processes for new and reviewed certificates. This overviews recent developments and how to best comply. And 5, guidance for certificate holders to be compliant. We still retain this section, but the previous presentations covered it more in depth, which I'll explain. And then 6, regulator expectations for compliance practice. So we'll give you a winning formula about for how to actually maintain your practising certificate holders so they are current. Introduction to the webinar. As I said, the purpose is to engage mine operators and employers in their own dedicated workshop today. We've just completed the workshop for holders, and you will see material that we've covered in that workshop in this workshop. Part of the compliance priorities, as I explained, from January, and that's in response to some ongoing issues of some holders and mine operators not being compliant. A question and answer session, as I've mentioned, but we're not here to debate the merits of the schemes or individual issues. And it's been recorded, so keep your cameras turned off so we're not recording your face. So starting with the legislative requirements in their application. This here is a slab out of obviously section 19 about the safety management system. And I'm providing that because the focus there is about having the management structure and having the details there, as I'm highlighting the cursor 1, filling temporary permanent vacancies, acting positions requirements, competence requirements for positions in the structure, and also the people who are responsibility for work health and safety, including mining supervisors, which will be practising certificate holders, and names of relevant persons, and specifically in 5, persons nominated to exercise key statutory functions at the mine and responsibilities and supervisions. Also, for contractors likely to work at the site, the control measures for them as part of their plan. I'm mentioning that because I'm aware that there is some organisations that hire out practising certificate holders to mines to fill roles for them. So the above requirements set that high level framework which the mine operator must manage their practising certificate holders and those of contract organisations who may provide them to remain current to be nominated to practice in the statutory function. So starting at that top level, let's now drill down a bit closer. So in part 7, section 125, duty to notify regulator other matters. This is where the operator must give notice of a reportable event, and there's a lot of events listed here, but for the recommencement of normal mining operations, significant interruption, suspension, as soon as reasonably practical after the operator becomes aware the mining operation will commence. Notice it must include identification of details, persons nominated to exercise key statutory functions, and the minor competency of the person exercising the functions. And also, before I haven't included it here for brevity, for additional matters to be addressed, including their contact details. Now, that can be submitted electronically via the Resources Regulator portal, Operators portal, operator notifications, commencement of mining. I mightn't have got that clear when I read out these provisions at the top. That's what we're talking about, commencement. Then you have section 7 and 8. You might be familiar with this, but I'll go over it quickly. May require the mine operator to give notice of proposed material changes to the information provided for 3G and 4A as soon as they become aware of it. As said there, A, B, C, and D be given an approved way and form. The form is the notification of other matters, including reportable events on the regulator website. I provided the address there, and must be submitted to cau@regional.nsw.gov.au. If you have further information, you can email or contact the Central Assessment Unit on the address shown above or the phone number indicated there. So hopefully you're familiar with this, and I'm just recapping to paint the whole scene of the landscape. So moving now into the section 132. In general, it summarises the system that only individuals who are nominated to exercise the function by a mine operator can do so if they meet the requirements set out in Schedule 10. If they seek to meet those requirements, hold a practice certificate, then they can no longer practice and be nominated. We've got a fact sheet that can help you with just some general information around that on our website. The link's provided there as well. The obligations of mine operator. The summary here will be also provided to holders so they know how they impact on mine operators with the corporate penalties, etc. So, firstly, 1, the individual does not meet the Schedule 10 requirements, e.g. the practising certificate expired and the holder is still practising. I forgot to clarify that obviously the things in red are my comments added to alongside the legislation summaries or extracts. That's why I put it in red, so obviously it's very clear the distinction. This is what I'm giving advice about the application of things. So this is happening at the moment. And this is what's a part of obviously initiated this priority project out of concerns for the instances. 2 is readily available to exercise and capable of exercising the statutory function, e.g. one person exercising the function at different mines between shifts or plus a shift geographically, e.g. inspections. More than one individual is nominated to exercise nominated to exercise a key statutory function in the mine, e.g. mining engineer manager. Continuing on, section 133, assure mining activities do not take place except in other mechanical observation if the class of mine has a key statutory function where no individual is nominated to exercise it for more than 7 days. To refer to the guide to statutory functions on our website, the address shown here, the regular expectation is mine operators will have plans with actions that will enable them to nominate an alternate holder to cover absences. Okay, section 134. Obligations on nominees. Individuals nominated to exercise a statutory function of mine must, as soon as reasonably practicable, inform the mine operator of a matter that may interfere with the individual's ability to exercise the statutory function, the penalty. Details of that are, other example could include expire of the practising certificate or cannot meet the maintenance of competence condition before expiry. Note, this has been shared with the practising certificate holders webinar this morning. For certificate-related matters, nominees can contact the regulator to seek advice on how to address any compliance issues for their certificate. So we're here to help with that and a joint sort of, I suppose, role to support people, make sure that they are maintaining current, but if they're not, they need to tell mine operators as soon as they know reasonably practicable, and then obviously seek to have a resolution, which they can come to us about, and we can look at that resolution, like with their shorter maintenance of competence. And section 138 is eligibility for a practising certificate, and refer to the guide for statutory functions again. Continuing on, section 140, grant of practising certificate. 3, a practising certificate remains in force until sooner cancelled for a period of 5 years commencing on the date on which it's granted, or in brackets, no extension. So I've had people approaching us to say, oh, I haven't made my maintenance of competence requirements. Can you give me an extra year on top of my 5 years? The answer is we can't under the legislation. For a shorter period specified in the practising certificate, we don't do it. We just give them 5 years unless there's other reasons which don't really apply we're talking about today. More than one practising certificate may be issued to individuals under the sections 5, whether as a replacement or renewal of existing certificate. So we can grant a new one before the previous one's expired, as I'm noting there. and they can exist together at the same time, but one obviously starts after the other one expires. And a separate practicing certificate authorised the individual to exercise another statutory function. Now, there was a period initially where we were actually issuing, where say a person passed their certificate of competence exam and they got a new function, we gave them a new certificate. We're no longer doing that. The reasons are, amongst many, is that the person's better having one certificate and we add the function to it. That way in your records, it's still the same practicing certificate number, and the person just starts their maintenance of competence requirements from the date for that function. That's why we only issuing one and update the one with additional functions as such. And very briefly, we would look at that in terms of maintenance of competence auditing. So we'd look at the first 2 years or whatever it is, the ratio is for, say, a deputy, and the next 3 years is for under manager, and we apply those ratios accordingly. Fortunately, that doesn't happen a lot, so it's not a big problem as I see it out there. The other one is Section 141 interstate practicing certificates, and just saying disregard that currently. They don't exist between New South Wales, Queensland and WA. I'm not aware of any developments that will start anytime soon. The conditions on the Section 142, bolding added for emphasis. It's a condition by way of written notice to do the following specified in the notice: provide specified information about the individual's competency, B, knowledge of law, C, complete specified training courses or other specified forms of learning. Now, this is the part of the basis of the condition to main competency for the holder practicing certificate. Continued, 142, condition that the holder must keep record that demonstrates individual ability to hold the certificate, including evidence of completion of course and timesheets. This is also part of the basis of the condition to main competency for records, expanded on in the Gazette notice. The holder of the practicing certificate must comply with conditions imposed on the practicing certificate. There's the penalty units. 143, suspension and cancellation of practicing certificate. I'm not going to cancel that because we put out this last year an information sheet suspending or cancelling a practicing certificate for how the regulator approaches this. And there's also that address there if you don't have the link available. The key notes here, there is no provision that enables a holder to voluntarily surrender their practicing certificate to cease the certificate conditions. The regulator may be able to cancel the certificate if the holder provides one of the grounds under Section 143. So that would be if they're not meeting a condition. And we have worked with people on that basis to look to cease their certificate. But it's a process. We have to give notice and so on. So it's very involved. And it's obviously you have to volunteer reason to say why we should cancel the certificate, which is serious. So that's problematic. We are looking into it. It may be something we look to change in future amendments to the regulations, if that's appropriate. Holders of these circumstances should email mca@regional.nsw.gov.au to seek resolution, which they have been doing. The register of practicing certificates. So the regulator must maintain a register of practicing certificates, the register. The purpose is to provide a relevant person with information about holders of practicing certificates, including the following. So I've just slabbed that in there, but obviously key things is identifying details of the holder, including name and contact details, qualifications and skills of the holder, the places which the holder has worked, details of the practicing certificate, including expiry date, conditions, and details of an action under WHS laws in relation to the person, conviction, suspension, or cancellation. The details required to remain in the register is partly what the holder must maintain the regulator as per the condition of the practicing certificate. Now, I will cover in the next slide that obviously these things of contact details of the holder is something that we're not providing as a general first point because it's not appropriate as necessary for the purposes of disclosing. So we can, under 3, collect, store, use, or disclose information for purposes of the register. And that's disclose information to register a relevant person if the regulator considers it reasonably necessary to do so to reduce or control the risk to the health and safety of a person, including an individual outside New South Wales. So what that means in Section 5, a certification agency means the board, New South Wales Mining Petroleum Competence Board. An agency in another jurisdiction exercises the function of certification of competency workers in the mines, including the following agencies: Resources Safety Health Queensland, Government WA, Department of Mines, Industry, Federation and Safety. So a request from an interstate regulator may just justified disclosure could be a holder has an interstate certificate on mutual recognition and that being investigated for their work health and safety competence. That has happened. But the information we provide, I'll finish this slide and I'll clarify a point. So the relevant persons, we can supply it to a certification agency, the operator of a mine, the industry health, safety and health representative, a mine safety health representative, a person exercising a similar function, those described. Typical requests enabled above are mine operators, HR staff, emailing MCA regional to NSW.gov to confirm a prospective employee holds a practicing certificate. And that sort of request, for example, we wouldn't be giving the personal contact details of the person, etc. They would have that, and they would provide that details of the person sufficient to be able to go in for us to match to our register the right person and confirm that in that particular example, which is atypical and it's available under this particular provisions. Note, it does not enable disclosure to employment reference checking agencies. They must supply a consent form from the holder, regardless if they are working on behalf of a mine operator. I would add that we have approaches from agencies saying, can you give us all the names and addresses of all the people that hold a practicing certificate XYZ? The answer to that is a no. It's not a work health and safety matter. They want to recruit people. They won't get information through this register. So I want to make a point of that to reassure people that we're not about to give all this information out to anybody. Obviously, it's very clear here what the purpose is and who can have access to it. But I want to make sure people are aware of this and that they can actually access the information if necessary. Observations for compliance performance. Applying for a new certificate. I want to cover this briefly because it's atypical, the problems we see with people registering for a user account on the portal to apply. And things like leaving too late, so rushing and putting unreasonable expectations on us to deliver. Reapplying multiple times. We've got multiple requests. It just jams up the system. Not providing the required ID documents to prevent identity fraud and ensure privacy, or the documents are not certified as true copies of the originals. Not checking their emails for regulated communication in the process. Not following the instructions in email for what they need to do next. Ringing the mining competency team because they have not done one or more of the parts above. Okay, they apply on the incorrect online form and pay the incorrect fee, requiring us to refund the difference in most cases. There is sufficient guidance on the regulator website to guide people through the process easily and quickly. The help guides, for example, navigating to the mining workers portal or apply or renewing a practicing certificate, is available on our webpage. If still in doubt, those people can email the MCA regional or phone us and we will actually support them to resolve it. So I'm sharing that because I know that's individuals and that's them engaging with us, but I'm providing it to give you the idea that if you can support your people to navigate these things clearly and easy and using our guidance, then that process will be a lot easier, streamlined, and they'll get their practicing certificate much more quickly and so on. So that's why I provided not to complain about mine operators at all. It's about saying this is what's happening and this is some of the problems about getting things done quickly so people get their practicing certificate in a timely manner. Secondly, while holding a practice certificate, maintenance of competence. So the report for the 2023 audits of holders soon to be published have similar findings to the 22 report with a few exceptions. There's a copy of the report that's been to the Competence Board. Firstly, around 33% increase in requests, 206 in total, to audit 100, due in the main to email bounce backs or ignoring the request being from a contractor, despite the fact sheet attached and verifying their details. Outcomes were compared to 2022 with 82% substantially conforming and a new category of 4% totally conforming, which is a really pleasing new category. The types and number of non-conformances were similar, but slightly less. The 14% substantially non-conforming mostly had far more hours than required in extensive logs, but did not apply the requirements to what they claimed, e.g. learning was not eligible. Did not meet the requirements. For example, 6 had not completed the learning from disasters training. So following on from that, we're not seeing consistent evidence of individuals interacting, these individuals these audits, but other ones I'll mention in a moment, interact with the mine operator and employer in a systemised way to, I'll clarify it in a moment, plan their learning to maintain competence instead of recording whatever and whenever to comply. Checking on their progress to ensure they will be compliant with their certificate conditions, and or ensure they renew and have a new certificate prior to the former one expiring. Now, the observations are based on a review of 48 maintenance of competence logs for individuals applying for a new practising certificate after the previous one expired, since September 2023 to 20 March 2024, in response to the Section 15 notice issue, which I'll cover more in a moment. They are mainly first-line supers, but there are some managers amongst them as well. So these are some observations, which will then look at the solutions. Holding and renewing a practising certificate for your information. Some holders are doing one or more of the following. They have not read and actioned the expiry date of the certificate or the conditions, apart from the regulator and their mine operator assisting with this. So I do acknowledge mine operators I can see are doing that. This includes not identifying their employer had incorrectly recorded their expiry date. That's probably a joint problem, I think, between the holder and the mine operator. Not maintaining the contact details of the regulator, so they don't receive a reminder email 3 months to expiry and at expiry, and then say it's the regulator's fault. They did not renew in time. The email from the portal address, New South Wales Resources Regulator at service-now.com, goes to their spam folder. They don't monitor the email address on our records or miss the reminder and expiry details. Don't apply when reminded, and then leave it to the last moment to, sometime not being able to practice for a period until a new one is granted. Certificate expires and they're still practicing in the function nominated. I'll just go back for a moment to the previous slide. Let me say that overall we see that people are applying to renew their practising certificate, and you can see they've got the reminder 3 months out, and you can see when they apply, they're applying for a certificate that's going to expire in about 3 months' time. It's like a wave, Mexican wave at the football, and you can see that happening, and that is really good to see. So obviously people are getting it and are able to action it, is also my point. But obviously some people just aren't doing that, and this is what they get themselves into difficulties because of that. And unfortunately, that also implicates the mine operator. Applying for a new practising certificate. The process is unchanged for a person applying for a new certificate for the first time. If the person could have applied in the implementation period for practising certificates to October 2020, then an additional condition to complete 20% more MOC in the first year of the certificate may be imposed by the regulator. So if they had a certificate of competence from 2010, then they could have applied in the implementation period that we went through from about 2017 to September 2020. But they didn't do that. And this is a risk area. If they've been away, out of industry, and they come back, still got a certificate of competence, they're still eligible under the legislation, then we have to get them the practising certificate. Okay? But we'll put a condition automatically, 20% more at least, and whatever else we think is appropriate to ensure that person actually has the competence. And I know mine operators manage this space as well, but that is how we are managing that. There are additional steps now for a person applying when their previous certificate has expired, as it was thought some were avoiding the compliance declaration and the renewal application. Section 155 notice under the Work Health and Safety Act is served to provide information and recognised records to demonstrate compliance. Person provide response within 6 weeks, otherwise application is closed off. Response requires person to show they have and will satisfy the law and conditions, including they have been not practising after the expiry date, and a log of learning for maintenance of competence during the expired certificate and since. So sometimes it is several months before they actually apply for a new certificate. So that's the current process for people who let it expire. Now, if we move on to renewing, the planning stage. So refer to the 14th of June webinar presentation for steps and screenshot to renew as it's covered in full. The Apply or Renew Practising Certificate webpage at this address also provides guidance through the life cycle of holding a practising certificate. Holder may renew their practising certificate up to 6 months prior to the expiry date. Resources Regulator email a reminder to the holder email address on record 3 months prior to expiry. Most holders now have a user account for the Resources Regulator portal, but for those who don't, allow a time of at least 1 week to register for one by providing ID documents. If they don't follow the process and our instructions, they risk wasting valuable time and delays. The regulator will generally process complete applications with payments within 3 weeks, but it can be longer. But at the moment, we're in the life cycle that we're mainly renewing deputy certificates, and that's a lot of certificates. That's why it's taking potentially longer. Generally, we work with that 3 weeks or even shorter. A holder may apply up to the day prior to expiry, and we can backdate a new certificate issue to the new grant date at the start of the next certificate following. But there may be a period where they may not be able to practice. Clearly, you want to avoid this by holders applying much earlier. So, renewing a practicing certificate, recent changes. The renewal application has amended sections declaring whether you've met the conditions on your practicing certificate that requires to answer yes or no to the questions. So the first one here is the extract for the maintenance of competence condition. This is how it's framed up. And for the question, have you met the requirements? We'll put in this example, no. And then below, you must specify why, what you'll be due to compliant for a new certificate. So I've just put some text in there, give you some idea what a person should be putting in there to give us understanding of, well, okay, if you're not compliant, why is that? And what are you going to do about it? So you are in compliance for your new certificate. So in this case as well, I've also referred as the example that the log is supplied. There's an actual paper clip at the bottom of the application for a certificate. And what you do is you attach it at the bottom of the actual application. Otherwise, if we thought there was enough details here, we could ask for that log as part of our processing. But again, that just slows down the process. So changes continued. So the other question is maintaining your contact details. In this example, we've answered yes. And that's it. Now, the tip is if you haven't, no, then before you apply in this section, update your contact details by following the steps in the previous section. Then you can declare you have been compliant. Only just, but at least it's better than not. So that's just the tip, and it was given to practicing certificate holders in the previous webinar. To finish off, we have proposed to send an SMS text at the same time as a reminder email in the near future, but that's subject to us getting that put in through our processes. Again, reiterates that people need to maintain their contact details like their mobile phone number so we can send them the text. We're going to be able to do this in the near future. So the guidance for certificate holders, so you're aware of that, and obviously we are hopefully amplifying the message out through mine operators. So the sample of PC expiry date and standard conditions is provided here. You got your grant date and expiry date, and these are the standard conditions that you may have seen on a practicing certificate. So tip, but this is for the holder. Note the expiry date in your personal record systems to remind you to renew 6 months prior. Cross-check against any employer or mine operator system for the date they have. Follow the links to the Maintenance of Competency Gazette, which is a nice tight summary of this are the requirements. If you need more guidance, go to a web page, Maintenance of Competence, as the address shown there. Okay, so now going to the Maintenance of Competence web page for guidance, and that's the address shown under the heading there. And this is a copy of the Guide to Maintenance of Competence. But before we go into that, make it very clear, apps are not owned or operated by the Resources Regulator. We were approached by those providers to have input about our requirements, so they could take that away and work it through their app, and they have followed up with some occasions to clarify things. But we don't have any more connection apart from that. We don't have access to the records. People must supply the records out of those apps to us in the case of an audit, and etc. We don't monitor people through those apps, etc., etc. Following from that, using an app or spreadsheet without understanding and applying what's required may mean the holder has a higher risk of being substantially non-conforming in an audit. I don't have any comment about, I think the apps do what they're supposed to be doing, but a person, I've seen this in audits of the log, can put something in incorrectly that does not match what they describe they've done. So therefore, if you don't understand what you're claiming, therefore you will make mistakes. That I don't believe, and I'm happy to be corrected by the app developers, that they can't stop that. The guide to maintenance of competence, saying read it in full at least once and refer to necessary for sections like areas of competence, learning hours, learning types requirements, especially 7.4.1. That is the criteria for formal training courses. Now, a question was asked in the last session, and I didn't pick up on it until afterwards, that they said, what about the regulator forums? You know, we go to these meetings and forums, and I said, oh, well, okay, that's a point. We should be making sure we provide these details of who the presenter is and so on. Those ones are a different category. They're seminars, workshops. They don't need the criteria. It's only formal training courses that need the criteria. So just to clarify that, well, just on that particular point, and I'll actually put some guidance out in the Mine Safety News article just to clarify understandings about what applies that criteria and what it doesn't, which is obviously seminars and conferences. And I won't get into detail, but obviously people who provide conferences can actually have people as part of those speakers who actually deliver it as a training type course, criteria, learning objectives, etc. That's their prerogative, and that's allowable under the scheme. 7.4.3 is what we don't accept. It's a little bit of a running list of things. That's handy for people to know that. FAQs, build up from inquiries from holders. Example, can I claim attendance at pre-shift meetings and toolbox talks? Now, I'm not going to give the answer because I prefer people like the holders to go and look at that document on our webpage and look up the answer. Okay? And so they have that connection, knowledge, they can go back and tap into it anytime they like. And of course, the webinar presentations and the copies of the previous ones, like the last 14th of June one, 2023, is still current, still very relevant. So people can look at that and refresh themselves on requirements. So continuing on with guidance. Now, the Resources Regulator logbook to use or refer to worksheets as an aid for. So I'm not saying you have to use the logbook. What I'm saying that there are worksheets and you could use the app, but there are worksheets in there that would benefit holders. So the first one, summary of types of formal and informal learning, any caps on hours, and options for evidence to keep. So here you have the learning types in the second left column. The middle one shows where there's caps on things for 4 hours. There are the caps as well, but that's just a very quick reference. And then you have the evidence required. As you can see, there's a number of options. If you've read the guide, then you'll know there's a number of options of the sorts of evidence you can keep. Not all of them, but one of them alone will be sufficient. This is a nice, handy one worksheet thing to actually quickly refer to. And I've actually got the idea from a mine site that the training person actually put this together. So I've borrowed the idea from them. The regulator recommended logbook also has a self-assessment for conformance to maintenance of competence requirements based on the criteria used in audits. And here's the example of one I'm showing on screen. And it's set up to say the check, the guidance, the response, if no, detail the actions to correct. So if a person does this at points, and you could work with them as part of your systems to do these checks, to support them, to prompt them to do it, then they can actually see how they're tracking. And they can make corrections as they then go. If they then ask for an audit, they're in a much better, stronger position to actually have a successful audit outcome that is substantially conforming, totally conforming. The other benefit of using this is if they actually go to renew their practicing certificate, that condition question we went through before about maintenance of competence, if they go through and do this self-assessment and they come through positively and they do corrections, they can then answer that question confidently. Yes, I believe I'm actually complying with that condition. So that's a really good tip, I think. The next one, I'm not going to go in for time elements. I want to have time for questions at the end, but this was actually out of the presentation last year. I'm providing it here for ease of reference, but it's about that condition to maintain contact work details, because we aren't seeing good compliance from holders on this. So this first page is about, of 3 slides, is about how to get your login and log into the system. If you're going to change your email address, you have to go and email the CAU. The next one is about going into the portal, and it takes you where to go and where to actually update your contact details. Selecting it, as I'm highlighting here with my cursor. And the last one is actually the page where you update your details, which is the personal details, skills and qualifications, places of work. So it's electronic, it's easier to do, it's just people remembering to do it. Again, your systems can prompt people to do this, then you're helping them comply. The regulator's expectations for compliance best practice. So, just before we go into that, the guidance available on the Practicing Certificates Overview webpage, refer address above, there's a flyer on Practicing Certificate Check on Progress. It's issued into April 2021, as shown here, and it's current as an overview of steps in mine operators, employees, and holders. Refer to and actually the best practices in the slides that follow, but it does not cover everything, but it's a basis you can possibly use to refer to as well. The first best practice, the mine operator safety management system and any contractor safety and health management plans, such as labour organisations providing practicing certificate holders, address the maintaining the currency of certificates and the holders satisfying the condition. And that's just an overview statement. The SMS is linked with any human resources system for the mine operator, in particular recruitment or contracting of a person for holding and using their practicing certificate, where the person's currency and satisfying the requirements of the practicing certificate are assessed, including confirming those details available in the register from the regulator, e.g. recruitment checklist processes. The SMS to record and actively manage. Individuals engaged in extra statutory functions requiring practice certificate are recorded and notified to the regulator as required for key stat functions. Which functions the holder can practice in, the dates on their holder certificate for when the certificate is granted from and expires, and that's automated in your system. It's not a manual check, is what I'm actually going to extend that to. If your systems, like your SAP or whatever it is on your site, actually manage that actively electronically, then it's going to potentially happen, apart from obviously system bugs, but let's assume that they aren't. Note any additional conditions to those standard ones. Either you complete 20% more maintenance of competence in the first year of the practicing certificate. The maintenance of competence learning being completed and completed by the holder directly or through a third-party provider, e.g. apps. Holder notify of any audit they have completed with the regulator contractors and the outcomes and the action of any non-conformances or suggestions. Obviously, if you've got an audit and you've got non-conformances, they should be actioned before the next audit. So if you can have your systems managing that space as well, that would also be beneficial for the holder to maintain the certificate. Remind holders to renew 3 months prior to expiry or 6 months, up to you, and that will complement the regulator email reminder. Require and record details on renewed certificate, noting your changes prior to expiry of existing certificate. Administrative controls and possibly engineering, e.g. security card acts, alerts are entry to work. So the cards linked to their practicing certificate type records that the renewed certificate is not provided prior to expiry date, and they then don't practice. I'm not saying lock them out, it's not be clear, but I'm saying it has security alerts, so that's flagged. So it's possibly, if it gets to that stage, there's a built control in that may support for the person to not practice. Continuing on, determine what level of support will be provided to holders to complete and claim learning to satisfy the maintenance of competence condition. Providing training of our claimable activities, and mentoring, delivering training, etc. Releasing individuals to attend activities identified in the planned process, external seminars, being an examiner. Use of QR codes for events for individuals to scan with an app for ease of recording, if not reaction by training records. Link the SMS to any mine operator training and development or performance development system. So maintaining a practicing certificate is managed in common between the systems, such as the below items where there are monitoring scheduled meetings. Maintain current contact and work details with the regulator, as well as New South Wales Resources Regulator at service-now.com and the MCA at regional.nsw.gov on the safe centres list. Complete sufficient activities to satisfy the maintenance of competence scheme requirements, e.g. download a log of app graphs. Learning is planned that is benefit to maintaining competence and the mine operator, not just for compliance, such as through a training matrix used at the mine site. That's one idea. Complete a self-assessment worksheet for their compliance in the resources regulator completed spreadsheet at regular intervals to check their progress before any potential audit. This might be supported by internal audits of high-level data, such as total hours done, etc. Again, a suggestion. Check they remain a subscriber to publications or resources such as the Regulator Mine Safety News. So this next page I won't go through because this was given to the practicing certificate holders when we were sort of 5 minutes out from finishing officially, but that's what they were provided with. I provided it here with you so you know what messaging we give to them. Very much you'll see that all these points here will be collaboratively working with the mine operator to ensure that that person maintains a current practicing certificate and is satisfying their conditions. Work hand in hand. We're encouraging that, obviously, that interaction so it works for both parties. Conclusion, which again for time I'm not going to go through all of it, was the same as last year, but the majority of people are compliant. We're not saying that's not the case, but what we are saying, there are exceptions, and that is keeping contact and work details current with us. Not renewing the certificate until just before expiry date and after. And so that means their system and potentially the mine operator system didn't ensure the person could not, practice continuously, and then individuals practice without a current certificate. Because those instances, I'm saying the mine operator system also failed to prevent it. The evaluation of the maintenance of competence scheme is noted here. It's been progressed by the regulator with the Mining Petroleum Competence Board as part of their strategic plan. So that's happening now, and that'll be happening over the next couple of quarter meetings with the board. The ongoing requirement to complete learning from disasters training is being considered. That came up as a question in the last session. I've said to people, it depends on your circumstances whether you have to undertake the training now. For example, if you're in year 5 of your certificate, you haven't done it and it expires in 3 months' time, obviously you should do it. That's a requirement. But if you're in, say, year 1 of the next certificate and you've done it in the last certificate as required, then you could say that, okay, I'll wait and see approach with that. Doesn't mean mine operators can still want to pursue that learning from disasters training, and we are updating those case studies with a contractor at the moment. We will release that appropriate time after the evaluation obviously is completed. Lastly, we encourage people to continue to engage with us. We have lots of guidance. Admittedly, it's always a challenge of our website, but specific issues can be emailed to us or phoned to us as well. So thanks for attending. And you may now ask a question by raising a hand via Zoom function or placing a question in the chat. Camilla from our engagement team is going to do that. I acknowledged her in the last session that her and I were both working on this presentation to polish it off last night at 9 o'clock at night. I just acknowledge that commitment to trying to deliver the best we can on the day with all our commitments. But thank you, Camilla. So over to you.
Thank you. No chats as yet. If anyone would like to ask a question, here we go. We've got one here. Sorry, I may have missed this at the start. Will this presentation be available for download after this webinar? Yes. Yes.
Yep. Thanks, Camilla. You can answer that one. Yep. Okay, I know we're almost out of time, so people can email us afterwards as well. You have to go. So, any more questions before we finish up? Okay, was there anything in there that was controversial for anybody, or thought, geez, is that really reasonable for us to be expected as a mine operator to do that? I'd be interested in that feedback. Okay. Our Henry's raised his hand, so go ahead, Henry.
Yep. Henry?
You can unmute yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, just unmuted then. The only question I have is when our certificate holders renew, is the 5-year window a rolling 5 years for the maintenance of competency, or does it reset on the renewal date?
Yeah, so it is reset on the renewal date, Henry. So that's why the requirements, for example, some of these caps on learning types are a cap per year, and the per year starts from the date of granting. So year 1, if we got granted a certificate today, 20th of March, till 19th of March next year, you can do 4 hours claim for reading. So that's why the grant date is a critical date to base all the requirements off. It's not by calendar year or financial year, it's all based from that. So hopefully that clarifies that for you.
So at the end of the 5 years, say they've got their 60 hours plus, start from zero again.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, because I've just been maintaining with all added together, but yeah, I might look into as they renew, reset, or create another spreadsheet.
Right. Yeah, that's how we're working it. They're individual things. So what happens in that practicing certificate must be met. Obviously, your practicing certificate starts and that must be met.
Yeah, cool.
The other thing I'd add is that obviously we can grant it. So it might expire on the 27th of March this month. We can issue it today on the 20th of March and we say that you've granted a new certificate from the 28th of March. So they're always concurrent consecutive periods that we're talking about. There's no gaps unless the person lets it expire. Yeah. We don't have any option to do that.
That just simplifies things too for our internal audits as well. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yes.
Just to follow on from that question, if someone were to be audited in the first 2 years once they've renewed, and they could potentially just do all their learning in the last 3 years. They don't have to necessarily have learning in every single year. So if they were audited, say, in the first 12 months of their new certificate and they had no learning, they'd be seen as non-conformant?
No, so as you're expressing that the system allows you not to have to do things every single year. As you said, that it's got to be at least 3 years. You've got to be doing things. The guidance explains. So yes, you would be then you'd be audited in the next certificate period on your current certificate, but it is stated in the guide that you would be audited on the previous certificate period. So we don't, from an audited point of view, we would look at the current certificate period for compliance and the previous period as well and be auditing both. Now that's obviously in the scenario you just painted, totally practical, reasonable, because obviously the person hasn't had to do anything in their first year of the next certificate. They would be then required to provide the log for the previous certificate. And I believe in the guidance we have stated that it's only the current and the last certificate. So say, for example, the scenario plays out and then you have a third certificate you renew in 4 years' time in this scenario. We will only then audit the last certificate, which is the current one, and the next certificate for the next 5 years. So we don't go back to the first certificate, almost 10 years ago, for example. It's only the last period and the current period certificates.
We've got a question here in the chat. It has been criticised by many over the years that the MOC process is overly complex. After +5 years from the implementation of the scheme, does the regulator have any intentions to review, simplify and streamline the MOC process so it is more fit for purpose? It has been criticised by many over the years that the MOC, oh, sorry, that's a repeat of that same question. So you're ending out at that chunk.
Yes. Yes. So I take your comment. I'd reply by saying, I think that the evaluation of the maintenance of competence scheme discussion paper that was put out put some things in that discussion paper for response by people, which actually goes to the heart of some of the things you've raised there. So I think that indicates that the regulator with the Competence Board are actively contemplating those particular issues and that particular theme. It's now a case of all the submissions and responses being considered and how that then is progressed forward in terms of any changes that will be made by the regulator in consultation with the Competence Board. But I think that's actively being set out in discussion papers. If you'd like to read that even briefly, I think it'll give you some insight into some of the things that are under consideration and were asked for people to respond to.
Okay, another question here. Is the regulator expecting a large exodus from the industry by the older PCBUSs due to the requirement for them to finish the Cert 4 in surface extraction and mining by September this year?
So that's a very open question. I don't have information about where people may be at in terms of their fulfilling, the majority of people have a condition on their practicing certificate to have one of the qualifications, and there are several in the Gazette for Quarry Manager Tier 2. I think that's what we're talking about here, that they have to have by the 1st of October for majority, but there are some people that have a longer time frame than that we're putting conditions on even now. So it won't be everybody by the 1st of October. So there won't be that tsunami just because of the realities of how we've put that condition on for people. Secondly, that we are running small mines roadshows, and we have been actively communicating those expectations, what's been done. And I can only sort of add to this that we have a provision in our application form that enables people who may have potentially other type of qualifications that are basically older qualifications, for example, or they're not just exactly what we've prescribed in the Gazette, they can apply to say, can we recognise those qualifications as being equivalent? And they have to show that in the application form, and they can be equivalent. So at this point, I've got nothing to indicate that there's going to be that exodus, like you say. And so we'll progress on the basis that people are actively, and I know the RTOs are doing a lot of work in this space of providing these qualifications. So that we think that it's on track at this point of time, and there's nothing to indicate to us that that's not at this point. Hopefully that helps in the answer to your question.
And that seems to be it. Anyone else have anything they'd like to ask live? Nope, I think that concludes, Andy. Okay,
great. So obviously this webinar was dedicated to mine operators. I'll be interested in the feedback which Camilla's group will put around to get the feedback. So I'm obviously hopeful that this will be of great assistance to mine operators to have a refresh about, well, where are they at with things and where there may be things that they can consider or they can tick off that they are doing. And already I've heard some good practices today with this QA session. So we are here to support on this journey, and we are to support, but we obviously got to regulate to ensure the compliance happens as we go forward. So thanks very much for your attendance today.